Hello, this is Archie Dunlop with Talking Astrology with Archie on Wednesday, May the 10th, 2023. I have an issue with music. I always have done, really. In my childhood, maybe late teens, even early 20s, I did actually try to learn a musical instrument, but it was just a disaster. And I think that has created a certain amount of resentment towards music. Um, of course, it's some form of self loathing, I suppose. But I do remember when I was at school, I think I must have been 12. I went to a boarding school and there was a music teacher, and she was retiring, and the whole school was invited to donate to a to donate for some kind of present, or some retirement present for her. I mean, of course, it was entirely voluntary, but everyone donated, um, except for me and I think a couple of friends. We held out. We decided we were not going to donate. I mean, after all, it was voluntary. But a teacher noticed that we hadn't donated and approached each of us individually to ask whether we were really sure we didn't want to donate some money for her retirement present. Now, the other people who had not donated, they backed down. They ended up donating, but I didn't donate. I think I was the only boy in the school who did not donate to this retirement teacher's present. Why would that be? Well, I am a Gemini, but I do have Taurus rising, and I have Mars in Taurus, Mars rising in Taurus. So perhaps that makes me rather stubborn. And on the subject of Taurus and music, it would be the 66th birthday today of Sid Vicious, of the Sex Pistols fame. And I want to look at his horoscope. I've no idea if people have still heard of Sid Vicious. I think he was certainly very important in the 70s. And his singing, his voice, had some admirers. In particular, he did a rendition of My Way, which was actually used in the film Goodfellas. And I found a quotation about this from Leonard Cohen, who said, talking about My Way, "I never liked this song except when Sid Vicious did it. Sung straight, it somehow deprives the appetite of a certain taste we'd like to have on our lips. When Sid Vicious did it, he provided that other side to the song. The certainty, the self-congratulation, the daily heroism of Sinatra's version is completely exploded by this desperate, mad, humorous voice. I can't go round in a raincoat and fedora looking over my life saying I did it my way. Well, for 10 minutes in some American bar over a gin and tonic, you might be able to get away with it. But Sid Vicious's rendition takes in everybody. Everybody is messed up like that. Everybody is the mad hero of his own drama. It explodes the whole culture this self-presentation can take place in. So it completes the song for me." So Sid Vicious certainly had admirers outside the circle of punk rock, which of course was the 70s. What was going on in the 70s, perhaps the most important thing in the 70s. And here we have, and I'm going to now look at Sid Vicious's horoscope. That's Sid Vicious's solar return. So Sid Vicious, here's Sid Vicious, and he was a Taurus. I think the sign Taurus and the concept of my way, doing it my way, kind of fits. Taurus has a way of doing it, and it just continues doing it, and nothing is going to stop it. Um, in the case of Sid Vicious, aside from his music, he had a drug problem. And I suppose if you are a Taurian and you've got a drug problem, it may be really difficult to get out of it because you become set in your ways. There's no flexibility there. There's the Sun, Venus, Mercury in Taurus. We look at different sides of the sign Taurus. We saw Taurus the terrorist, as in Andrea Bada, as in Timothy McVeigh, as in Guy Fawkes, which is quite a self-denying thing, a self-denying aspect of Taurus. But there's also a sensual side to Taurus, a comfort, being in a comfort zone. And once you're in that comfort zone, you probably want to stay there. And so that might have some relationship to Sid Vicious and his drugs. And I think the main drug that killed him was heroin. He had some issues in New York. He had this relationship with this woman, Nancy Spungen, and she died of knife wounds. I think Sid Vicious was sort of implicated in that. And when he was released from prison, he was, I don't know whether he was, not that he was released from prison for killing her. He was released from prison because he was being held in custody. But his lawyers got him out, I think. Then he ordered some heroin, I think a large amount of heroin, and that was it. He died. So this is his chart. Taurus is, of course, quite a musical sign. That makes sense because the part of the body that one associates Taurus with is the throat, because you've got that. And so Taurus does have a connection with, not just music, but singing, what comes out of your mouth. So kind of that fits with Taurus. What we see with this chart is that most of the planets, in fact everything except for Saturn, is above the horizon. And we've looked at this situation before. And so when you have a lot of planets above the horizon, it indicates someone who is very much focused on the pressures of the outside world. There's not much grounding there. And so maybe Sid Vicious getting involved in punk rock and with the Sex Pistols and whatever, it was all just action, action, action. He was just out there. Where's the comfort? And so, of course, comfort, where do you get it from? I suppose you might get it from taking heroin, for example. Another aspect to this chart is that we notice Uranus is square the ascendant. So Uranus, in a way, is the highest planet in the chart, looked at from that perspective. And so Uranus shows that he's breaking barriers, breaking molds. He is being outrageous, and and that probably was a major part of his success. We also notice that his Uranus is making a square to Neptune, and he's got Neptune rising. Neptune is the planet of drugs, as well as alcohol, and it provides a very different picture from Scorpio. Scorpio, we think of a very fixed ascendant, one comes over as in a very definite way, but Neptune makes it kind of more confusing. And when we have Uranus square Neptune, we have the concept that Reinhold Ebertin in the combination of stellar influences, he describes Uranus-Neptune contacts as being I think he said, or is it a conjunction? One aspect of the Uranus-Neptune pair, he uses the wonderful words, elimination of the waking consciousness. Now, this Uranus-Neptune square was around for a long time, so in a way a whole mini generation of people would have had it, but in Sid Vicious's case, it links to the ascendant, because there we've got Neptune, because he's got Neptune rising, Uranus square the ascendant. Perhaps that's why and how this Uranus-Neptune conjunction was personalized. So those are a few thoughts about the chart. North Node. This is a North Node. This is the South Node. In astrology, the North and the South nodes, remember, they're not planets. They represent they're the intersection of the Moon and the Sun's paths. The North Node represents where we're supposed to be going to, and the South Node represents where we're coming from. And so what we need to do in our chart is we need to focus on the North Node and not the South Node. But the South Node can be very difficult to get away from. So in Sid Vicious's case, he's got North Node in Scorpio in the first house. The first house is about self. It's about doing things oneself. It's about taking the initiative. It's not listening. It's about not listening too hard to other people. That's where he should have been going. And in Scorpio, it's being very stubborn about it. But the South Node, remember, he's got Sun on the South Node in the 7th house. Other people. I think that too much focus on other people. And one person who some people think caused him a lot of damage was Nancy Spungen. There's a lot of controversy about Nancy Spungen and her influence on him. But I think at the time a lot of people resented her influence and felt that she was doing him absolutely no good. But he couldn't help himself. Indeed, I think it's been said that the more people, the more he was criticised for his relationship with Nancy Spungen, the more he stuck with her, and she played a large role in his destruction. Though we shouldn't forget that he might have used a knife to kill her, but we don't know. So perhaps that's his South Node, putting too much energy into other people. Somehow he should have thought for himself and acted for himself rather than be caught up in other people and their personalities and their pressures and so forth. But it must have been so hard. I mean, having Sun on the South Node, the Sun is a really massive, compelling force. And so it was just too easy to get into that Taurus, to get into that comfort, to get into being that comfort with other people and doing things their way. And of course, the comfort perhaps that heroin provided him with. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about Sid Vicious, except I will look at his solar return. This is the chart for when the Sun returned to when he was born on his 21st birthday on May the 10th, 1978, which would have been about 9 months before he died. And there's some interesting stuff going on here. There's a Moon-Jupiter conjunction in his 8th house. Normally one sees Jupiter as being a fortunate influence. But, the 8th house is about death. And he saw death as being very likely, and he is quoted as saying, I think, that he believed that he probably wasn't going to live beyond the age of 25. And so Moon Jupiter on the 8th house cusp, Jupiter in Cancer, that might suggest an easy death. We've got a conjunction, sort of wide conjunction between Mars and Saturn. And the Sun is opposition Uranus, and it's square Saturn. It was a difficult year for him, even if he hadn't have died. He had all the problems with Nancy Spungen, and this cloud over his head about whether or not he killed her. So I think that this solar return, yeah, I think it did indicate that at the very least it was going to be a difficult year for Sid Vicious. And I suppose to finish with Sid Vicious, I should look at his lunar return. This is when the moon returns to the place it was at birth, and it happens every month. And so he died in the early hours of February the 2nd, 1979. And this is a lunar return for January for January the 19th, 1979. Now, he did die in New York, but I take the view that you should set returns for the place you were born. I don't believe that you can really escape your fate by globe trotting around the world. And so if we set this chart, if we look at this chart, we see an exact Sun-Mars conjunction on the descendant. In astrology, the descendant is actually very often connected with death. I mean, I've just said that the 8th house is about death, but in fact the 7th house really is the death house in some respects, because it's the opposite of the 1st house. The 1st house is a house of who we are. It's us. It's the ascendant. But the 7th house is the opposite, and the setting sun. His lunar return happened with a setting sun, and that is suggestive of death and the end. And having a very close Sun-Mars conjunction on the descendant seems to me, certainly in hindsight, a strong sign that he was approaching his demise. So anyway, that's his lunar return. That's his solar return. If you're doing forecasts for people, I do recommend that you use both lunar returns and solar returns. And in my opinion, you should use the place of birth, not the place where you are when you have the return. So, as far as the planets for today are concerned, the moon continues to be in Capricorn, where it makes an opposition to Mars. Now, there is a Moon-Mars opposition every month, so it's not really a big deal, but it's quite an angry opposition. There's plenty of scope for having arguments with people with Moon opposition Mars. So we do need to be careful how we go, and we should be careful what we say and how we respond. Unless, of course, we really want an argument. So yeah, that calls for some caution. However, it's not all about arguments. If we look at Venus is at 3 Cancer, and it's making a sextile to the North Node. Now, I've just said that the North Node is about karma, but it's also about associations. And so with Venus sextile North Node, it is a time when we can start making new contacts. So it's probably a good day for networking. Making inquiries, seeing if we can get people to listen to us, seeing if we can get people to give them give us some of their time, and I think we might strike lucky. And going back to the karmic idea, we might meet people who are actually good for us, who can help us achieve our goals. Not any goals, but the goals that are right for us. As far as the midpoints are concerned, Pluto continues to be on the Mercury-Mars midpoint. Plenty of scope for persuasion, quite vicious persuasion, a kind of persuasion that has a psychological element to it. It's quite using words to get under our skin and using those words to get us to do perhaps what we don't want to do. Or it could work the other way around, we could be quite persuasive ourselves. So we do have to be careful about that. And I should also say that Mercury is on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. When we looked at Yevgeny Prigozhin's chart, he's the head of Wagner PMC. He's the Russian military organization that's trying to take Bakhmut from the Ukrainians, and he has Mercury on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. And I don't know whether you've been following the news, but he makes these incredible pronouncements. He very critical of Russia, of his own country. I mean, not his own country, but the military of his own country. He's also, complaining that he doesn't have enough shells and so forth, and blaming people for for the excess casualties amongst his men and so forth, and being quite outrageous in what he is saying. And that's because I think he has in his chart Mercury on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. And now today we also have we have this. We have Mercury on the Mars-Uranus midpoint, and so it kind of supports the Pluto on the Mercury-Mars midpoint. A lot of very angry words. We can tell people exactly what we think, and what we say in a worst case can almost be an act of violence. So think about what you're going to say, because we can cause today a huge amount of damage by saying the wrong things. So let's turn to my forecast for the 12 signs. I've decided to drop the star ratings. I don't think they're useful to talk about star ratings. It's just a bit silly. So, Aries, your optimism and vision is starting to get noticed. Taurus, don't let unimportant details and facts come between you and your higher vision. Gemini, you start organizing your environment, and bit by bit, the situation improves. Cancer, you can't agree with everyone, and your defensiveness could turn a skirmish into a world war. Leo, a difficult situation starts making sense, and perhaps you can benefit from it. Virgo, you can make people sit up and listen, but measured language is important. Libra, you have an easy relationship with your karmic destiny, and the right path is clearly illuminated. And I'm saying that because Venus is sextile the North Node, and Venus is, of course, ruler of Libra. Scorpio, other people are annoying, difficult to trust, and also very selfish. Sagittarius, where there's money, there's trouble. Partners are hasty and accident-prone. Capricorn, today you're very reasonable, and you're a hard person not to agree with. Aquarius, you can be forceful without having to put your head above the parapet. And finally, Pisces, you can see that the scenery is changing. Get ready for a shift of gears. So let's now turn to the I Ching. I asked the question, what is Wednesday going to be like for visitors to my YouTube channel? And I got hexagram number 24, the turning point, but it's locked. In other words, it doesn't move. So, sorry, I've got that wrong. Hexagram number 24, the return. And it doesn't move. So hexagram 24, return. And what return is, it's a straight line like this, and then it's 5 broken lines on top. So we get the idea of being in a situation where we can return to where we should be. And there's a suggestion that perhaps recently we've made a small mistake. and we've gone off the path. And now it's time to get back on the path. It shouldn't be a problem. We can return to normal. We can put things back on the tracks. But the fact that this hexagram is locked indicates that we might be lazy. We might not be bothered to do anything. Yeah, we have a chance to put things right, but we might just not do anything about it. So think about that. And it's just very important today not to be lazy. If you've made a mistake and you know how to put it right now. Don't wait until tomorrow. So that's all I'm going to say for today. And I will talk to you tomorrow.